So when I say that pollsters are interested in the opinions shared by some part of society, let me explain what I mean by that. But before I do, let me just make sure that everybody understands what I mean by pollsters. That term pollsters, those are the people who conduct public opinion polls. Once again, and I can't emphasize this enough, the pollsters that I'm talking about are people who are truly trying to estimate public opinion. There are some polls that we refer to as push polls. Push polls aren't designed to estimate public opinion. They're designed to shape public opinion. And so they'll ask questions that are designed to push people in a particular direction. They're designed to activate certain feelings so that people will give a desired response. When I talk about pollsters and public opinion polls, I'm talking about the people who are truly trying to estimate what the public thinks about a particular topic. Now, they make mistakes, they get it wrong sometimes, but they're actually trying to get the right answer. The problem is that it's hard to get the right answer, and so they do the best job they can with imperfect tools. So back to my definition where I say public opinion are the combined individual opinions, right? We know what opinions are shared by some part of society. Well, public opinion pollsters, when they go out into the field and interview people, whether they're doing it on the phone, whether they're doing it via the internet, they're not always interested in the same group. Some public opinion polls, when they conduct their polls, all they're looking for are the opinions of adults. So when they call up, for example, if it's a phone interview, they're going to ask the person who answers the phone, right? Or it's actually more complicated than that, but I'll come back to that. They'll ask the person who is on the phone, are you 18 years of age or older? And if that person says yes, they're included in the poll. So in public opinion polls, you'll oftentimes see the number of people who are included in their sample. The sample is the number of people they spoke with, and then you'll see an A afterwards representing adults. Sometimes they're more interested in the views of what registered voters. Now, how do they determine who a registered voter is? This is a sample of the kind of questions I'll ask to determine whether or not somebody is a registered voter. First, of course, they determine that somebody on the phone is 18 years or older, right? But then they'll ask questions like this. These days, many people are so busy they can't find time to register to vote or move around so often they don't get a chance to re-register. Are you now registered to vote in your area, or haven't you been able to register so far? You know, if you say, yes, I'm registered to vote, they'll ask a second question. Are you absolutely certain that you're registered to vote, or is there a chance that your registration is lapsed because you moved or for some other reason? They're giving somebody the opportunity to go, oh, maybe I didn't. Why are they doing that? Because people lie. Like, people want to sound like they're good citizens, and so they'll say they registered to vote. So they ask these questions as a way of giving somebody an out and admitting that they're not registered. But if somebody says yes to the first question and that they're absolutely certain, then they're considered a registered voter. If somebody says no to the first, or especially the second question, boom, thank you very much, and they're not included in the poll. They would have been included in the poll that was looking at adults, but now they're only looking at registered voters. Now, if they're interested in looking at likely voters and the opinions of likely voters, they'll still ask the question about whether you're 18 or over, because they only want the opinions of people who are adults. They will ask the questions about whether or not somebody is registered to vote, and you have to answer correctly on all of those, but then there are some additional questions to screen people out. So they'll ask questions like this. How much thought have you given to the coming presidential election? Quite a lot or only a little. If you answer quite a lot, then you're still in the poll. If you answer only a little, they say thank you very much and they hang up. Then they'll ask again, how closely have you been following news about candidates for the upcoming presidential election? Very closely, not too closely, or not at all closely? If you say very closely, well, you're still going to be in the poll. If you give either of the other two answers, bink, thank you very much, they hang up. But they're not done yet. Do you plan to vote in the presidential election, or have you already voted, or don't you plan to vote? Right? If you say that you plan to vote, or you've already voted because perhaps you voted by absentee ballot, then you're still in the poll. If you say you don't plan to vote, they hang up. Again, they don't hang up being rude, they just don't include you in the poll. And then finally, they'll say, if you plan to vote, how certain are you that you will vote? Are you absolutely certain, fairly certain, or not too certain? If you say you're absolutely certain, then they'll include you in the poll and they'll ask the rest of the questions that they have in the poll. If you say fairly certain or not certain, then you're no longer included in the poll, and now they've got the sample they want, likely voters. So as you can imagine, if they're interviewing adults, some who may or may not be following the election closely, some who may or might not be registered, if they're asking adults versus registered voters versus likely voters, those are three entirely different groups of people. Well, let me ask you a question. Which group do you think expresses the strongest opinions about politics? Adults, registered voters, or likely voters? Well, if you said likely voters, you're correct. Because these are the people who are paying attention all the time. They've given a lot of thought to the presidential election. They're following it very closely. Some of them, they definitely plan to vote, and in some cases, they've already voted. Right? These are the people who are really interested in politics. Adults may or not be following it at all. And then registered voters fall in between the two. A lot of times people will point out, they'll say this poll had this percentage supporting the president and this poll had a completely different percentage. See, polls are nonsense. These are just BS. But oftentimes what they're looking at and they're comparing polls, one which was administered to adults and the other which was administered to registered voters or likely voters. So it's very important that when you're comparing public opinion polls, you make sure that the groups that they sampled are the same. There may still be variation, and I'll explain why there's variation. There still may be variation, but at least you know you're comparing apples to apples, adults, and adults, registered voters, and registered voters, or likely voters, and likely voters. Okay? So that's what I mean by public opinion being the combined individual opinions, again, opinions, not what's in our head, what we express, shared by some part of society, either adults, registered voters, or likely voters.